Um, Welcome, Professor Gautam Ghoshal. Gautam Da has come to Malda College previously and he has always enlightened us with his visions, with his philosophy, with his oratory. And today we are going to listen to him uh, about Mother in the Cathedral, the spiritual drama, the poetic drama of T.S. Eliot, the, the martyrdom of Thomas A. Becket. And Gautam Da, welcome to the session, and it's over to you.
Thank you, Anuradha, for inviting me to participate in this seminar and to exchange my views. Can you hear me properly? Can you hear me?
I, I can hear. I hope the students can also hear.
Okay.
Yes,
So
sir,
I'm not,
you're audible.
so I'm not shouting too much. Is it okay?
Okay, sir, fine.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So actually, I'm not a very great fan of T.S. Eliot's poetry. Not at all. My favorite poets are Whitman, Yeats, Rabindranath, and Sri Aurobindo. But I am a great fan of Eliot the critic, and also I appreciate the things he has done for modern drama, for modern poetic drama, because as poetry has turned more and more inward, subjective, uh, even the epic is accommodated into the lyric in Whitman's Leaves of Grass. So even the lyric is being accommodated in the epic. So, like that, poetry is turning more and more subjective, and the trend is for the, as in the last talk, in the last discussion, they were talking of confessional poetry. It is confessional because it comes from the fountainhead of the spirit. And the dots are because it leaves much to the imagination of the readers, and it is part of the technique of compression, précis. So it leaves many things untold for the readers to know, because if we tell so much, because poetry is a very refined medium, it does not admit of too much speaking. It must be much in little. So I am a great fan of Eliot, the prose writer, the critic, and his experiments in poetic drama. Let me speak about what, in brief, what is his ideal of poetic drama. Because from the 1880s, Rabindranath, Yeats, Maeterlinck, they have been trying to bring back poetry on stage. But Eliot had a different kind of theory, and he was trying to revive poetry in drama on stage. And here's the gist of his theory. He said poetry must convey action and emotion at the same time. Like Christopher Fry has said in an article in Vogue, that poetry in the theater is the action of listening. As the cry in Macbeth, still it cried to all the house. Glemisheth murdered sleep, therefore Corder shall sleep no more. Macbeth shall sleep no more. So this is drama and this is poetry at the same time. This coalesce fusion of drama and poetry, this makes poetry dramatic poetry. And Eliot is speaking of dramatic poetry. How can poetry become dramatic? Because it must convey emotion and action at the same time. And in that way, there is a technical term in drama, in the field of poetic drama, that there is a vestige of poetry in drama. What is that, the vestige of poetry in drama? Because much of the poetry is wasted, there is nothing of the tension there, as in Shelley's Prometheus Unbound. Much of the poetry is wasted, but it is beautiful, a piece of refined aspiration, a different kind of play, which Tagore, Maeterlinck.
Sir, you have muted yourself. You have muted yourself. We can't hear you.
Now you can you hear me?
Yes,
It's
sir.
okay. It was automatically muted. So we missed out something. I was speaking of the fusion of emotion and tension in a line which will convey action and emotion at the same time. And the third point is it has to be contemporary speech. So it has to be contemporary speech, it has to be poetry, and it has to be drama. Three things happening at the same time. Eliot.
Can't hear sir properly. I think you have muted
স্যার
sir.
মিউট হয়ে গেছে স্যার।
It is automatically being muted. I will keep
হ্যাঁ
watch
স্যার
now.
শুনতে পাচ্ছি স্যার এবার।
Okay. Now, there are three things to happen.
It's not automatically. Someone is muting yourself. He is Pankaj Sarkar.
Somebody
Please aware
else.
of it. Aware of it. Do not.
I am not doing that. It must be a third party.
It's doing
Yes.
Pankaj Sarkar.
It's okay now? It's okay? Can you
Okay,
hear
sir.
me?
Yes,
Yes
sir.
sir, you can continue.
So this is the three things have to happen simultaneously. It has to be action, it has to be emotion, and it has to be contemporary speech. So these are the three things on which Eliot was trying to experiment. And in 1935, he was called, it was a Farmaisi play. So it was a religious play. But because he was an artist, he was experimenting with the form of poetic drama. So he was trying to give something new in 1935 to the world of drama, a kind of model. And he went back to the past, to the Middle Ages, 1170, to the martyr of Thomas Becket, or the murder of Thomas Becket, and he interpreted it in terms of the basic spiritual aspects of life. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
So you got the theoretical part of Eliot's poetic drama? Was it clear?
Yes, sir.
Hello?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So three things have to happen simultaneously: tension, emotion, and contemporary speech. So he went back. He was not willing to use blank verse because it would take away from contemporary speech. He chose the verse of everyman and mixed some kind of rhyme and prose, but even the prose is not prose. It is only prose by courtesy. It is poetic prose throughout. But it is at the same time natural poetry. And in Riders to the Sea, the advantage was the speech of the Aran Island people were naturally poetic and naturally dramatic. So that was an advantage for Singh. But for other playwrights, you have to invent a speech which will be both action, emotion, and contemporary speech. So it is also a ritual drama, and there is a complaint against Eliot that the choric passages are too long. So the first three tempters, the arrival of the first three tempters to tempt him, because Beckett has returned from France, and Beckett is very proud. Everybody knows, even the priest is referring to his pride. And there's a clash between the king and Beckett. Who is more powerful, the church or the king? But Yeats observes that both Yeats and Raymond Williams, drama from Ibsen to Eliot, Raymond Williams and Yeats are united in their view that there is very little of the king, very little of the specification of the conflict between the king and Beckett. What exactly is the nature of conflict? It is not clarified. This is according to Yeats and Raymond Williams. Now the tempters come, and it was difficult. In dramaturgy, it was difficult to present the tempters on the stage because the tempters follow the morality tradition, but they are not moralities. They don't have name. First tempter, second tempter, third tempter, fourth tempter. And the first three tempters are material. Beckett has come back, and imagine his age. He was in his early 40s when he returned to England. He was born in 1118. And not slightly late. He was around 58. And at age 58, people still have plenty of the lower stuff. They drag him from behind. And the three tempters are tempting him on these issues. First is pleasure, because pleasure is extremely alluring. And the second and the third, they focus on power. And all these things are related: money, ego, sex, or money, power, sex. They are the triune in the world of purification. So Beckett is going through a process of purification, and the tempters are trying to test. And the tempters are Beckett's own voices, subjective voices, objectivized, but they are subjective voices. And dramatically, it was difficult to present them on the stage. But maybe in the days of computer, people can do that much better. And Anuradha will be able to tell you better because she is a practicing playwright. And she'll be able to tell you how it can be put on the stage. But basically, they are subjective. The first tempter is sensual, physical, trying to draw back Beckett to those past days when Beckett enjoyed life. Beckett enjoyed life, wine, women, everything. Because the priests, as Hemingway mocked the priest at the opening of Farewell to Arms in a wonderful irony. Priest always with girls, 1 against 5. So the priests are never looked upon as something very respected to the artists. So these are the temptations, and this is something like in the words of another poet, another great epic poet, I quote two lines from him. As one who searches for his bygone self, as one who searches for his bygone self and meets only the corpse of his desire, as one who searches for his bygone self at age 58 or 56 or 57, because the date of Beckett's birth is slightly confused, 1118 or 1120. So, as one who searches for his bygone self, the self of pleasure, the self of delight, sensual enjoyments, as one who searches for his bygone self and meets only the corpse of his desire, এখন ফিরে গিয়ে দেখছি সেই প্রলোভনগুলোর মৃতদেহ পড়ে আছে, প্রলোভনগুলো নেই, corpse of his desire. So Beckett is quickly out of this because they are dead bodies now. He can feel that they were there. As one who searches for his bygone self and meets only the corpse of his desires, তার কামনার মৃতদেহগুলোকে সে ফিল করতে পারছে, and he says no to them quickly. But the fourth tempter is very subtle. It comes with spiritual temptation and long, eternal worship of the bhaktas throughout the centuries. And Matthieson, O.P. Matthieson calls it, M.O. Matthieson calls it, a martyr's crown as its reward. I will be a martyr. People will come to give flowers to my grave. So it is a subtle spiritual ego. Pride is only one form of ego. It's strange that Eliot uses the word pride so much, because pride is just one form of ego. There are 1,000 others. So this is a subtle suggestion which comes from the fourth tempter, and it is from his inside. It is subjective. And it tempts him to be low, humble, so that he becomes great. That is why I'm not very fond of false humility, because it's better to be proud than to be falsely humble. So this is because that way you can correct yourself quickly. But false humility, it is you don't see it that you are falsely humble. So, but throughout Eliot's language is poetry, is action, and even when the chorus halts the movement with the long passages, the women of Canterbury, they form a large part of the chorus. The tempters form chorus. Even the knights form chorus. And they have a purpose. Unlike the Greek chorus, they are Senecan. They are not interfering in the action. They are standing apart and suffering. So there is something in Beckett's personal victory, which has a link with humanity's improvement, with the church, with the improvement of the church, with the good of the church, with the good of humanity, because humanity is involvement in Beckett's purification. One man's victory can still save the world. There is something in Beckett's individual purification which has a link with the purification of humanity, because the vibration goes out from the leader. But the leader comes, as Eliot says, that a man comes to be martyred and he is martyred. But there is a subtle aspect in this, what I call self-giving in my title. I said self-giving and dramaturgy. Dramaturgy, I have already spoken a lot. I will speak again on that. But what is this subtle self-giving? which you call sacrifice. Now, in between, there is a sermon where Beckett explains in prose. All the critics call it prose. That way, Sahajpat is also prose, you will say. But there are many, many lines in Sahajpat which is concealed poetry. Poetry, prose, poetry wearing the apparels of prose. এত রাত্রে কে ডাকাটা কি করে? And it immediately raises you to something else. এত রাত্রে কে ডাকাটা কি করে? And question creates sublime, as Longinus has said. So that way, the prose of the sermon as interlude is not exactly prose proper. It is prose. But there is in the inspired clarification, there is in the inspired clarification of the theme of martyrdom an element of concealed poetry. Now, there are two kinds of poetic prose. One is poetic prose, কবিতার মতো গদ্য, and the other is কবিতা গদ্যের ছদ্মবেশ পরে নিয়েছে. Two kinds of poetic prose. One is poetic prose, lyrical prose, which we know. The other is poetry proper, but it has on a jacket of prose. You know, this happens in Budo Angla, Rabindranath Thakur's, and it is only a prose by courtesy. Quite often, long narratives which are deeply poetic and rhythmic, and also speaking of subtler things, as much as the poet of Ruposhi Bangla. So, in the interlude, what is the significance of martyrdom is explained by Beckett himself on 25th December. And he's preparing for a self-giving. And you can't give the divine an impure body. You can't give the divine an impure body and impure consciousness. The divine has to be given your best, and you must merge your will into his will so that your ego will not be there. Your ego will not be there. Like if you differentiate between Kamala Das's ego and Whitman's ego or Rabindranath's ego, you will know the difference. Kamala Das speaks of a lot from his personal sufferings. But in Whitman, the ego expands into a wide consciousness, a widening, a deepening, and a heightening of consciousness in Rabindranath. So, this is a merger which Beckett aspires, because only the merger will, according to Christian theory, only the merger with the will of God will make you capable of this sacrifice. And let me clarify you the difference between sacrifice and surrender. It's a very subtle difference, but there is a great difference. Sacrifice is self-immolation. Something, it is good. A man capable of sacrifice has left the animal behind him. But even higher than sacrifice is surrender. Surrender is the true sacrifice, because you are surrendering to the will of God. And that makes you fit to shed your blood, and that blood will purify. As Beckett says, his blood given to purify me, my blood given to purify him. So for ages and ages, martyrs are coming and repeating this ritual, this myth of the sacrifice. And Christ is not just a historical situation. Christ is a living reality in us. Christ is a way of living and a culmination of humanity, so that others will be influenced by my life, my blood given to purify him. So there is in this individual sacrifice or surrender a great good for humanity, because the entire consciousness will spread to the church, across the church, to humanity, to the state of England, and to humanity. So this is not a very simple thing. Eliot knows it. So remember the story of the selfish giant. It's a very simple story. We read it at class 10, class 9. But remember that sacrifice is not stretching your neck to the guillotine. Even in Tale of Two Cities, when Sidney Carton is stretching his neck to the guillotine to save a person, it is a symbolic sacrifice. Because just before Sidney Carton is stretching his neck to the guillotine, he throws away the bottle of brandy to the bushes. Because these are the things, lower things, which have to be thrown away from the consciousness, from the lifestyle. That way I can be pure, I can be Christ. Christ is a small spot inside us, waiting to be enlarged, the human being. Christ is not a small thing. And when Oscar Wilde broke the walls in Selfish Giant, the giant broke the walls. It was breaking down the walls of the ego. And he becomes humble like a child. He kneels before the child and he sees marks of injury on the boy's hands. And he is feeling that, oh, who are you, is the question. This is exactly the purification which is internal, and the external bloodshed of Sidney Carton, of Thomas Becket. These are not quite important things. They are symbolic sacrifice. The basic sacrifice is the sacrifice of the ego. In Shakespeare and the Stoicism of Seneca, it's a beautiful essay by T.S. Eliot. It is in Selected Essays, the fat one. In Shakespeare and the Stoicism of Seneca, Eliot says, humility is the most difficult of virtues to achieve. Not sex. Sex can be won with effort. But ego is very difficult. I quote Ramakrishna Paramahansa. যেমন নারকোল গাছের বাল তো খসে গেলে দাগ রয়ে যায়, তেমনি অহংের একটি দাগ রয়ে যায়. But even this dog has to be removed, a total merger, so that you are fit for martyrdom. The entire merging of the human will into the will of the divine, into God. So this is the secret and the mystery of martyrdom, which is symbolical. And it's a wonderful play. I must say, I'm not a great fan of T.S. Eliot, I have said. I don't like his poetry. He's too erudite and he's quoting too much from the Bible. Here also in the Murder in the Cathedral, he is referring again, but here's the purpose. There is a constant reference to the sacrifice in the gospel. Constant reference to Luke, Matthew, John, Mark. Four stories from the gospel, and he says, I must prepare. At the moment Becket comes to Canterbury, he says, eager enemies waiting for me. Christ had also said the same thing. Eager enemies wait for the same thing. And some people like Prabodh Chandra Ghosh, who was a great scholar of the past in Calcutta University, very few know his name today. He once told me that this is actually an abolition, a purification process, and it's a symbolic thing. And it's a process of purification, and until you are purified, you are not fit for martyrdom. You can just go to the blade, to the sword, and say, kill me and I am a martyr. It's not that. Because whatever is killed inside you, the things killed are all the things of the lower nature related to the ego. And the ego is related to the first two appeals of the tempters. It is related. Ego is related to these things. And so it will again drag him down. So in the sermon, he is fit. Still, some people suspect that even after the purification, even after the interlude, Beckett displays a kind of finer ego, as much as Othello's soft you before I go. But that makes him human. So Eliot borrowed a lot from St. John, the entire Christ pattern. The entire Christ pattern was borrowed from St. John. But Eliot makes it a new kind of experiment. There are limitations. Every great art has limitations. People speak of Suchitra Mitra's limitations. So every great artist has limitations. And it is permissible now to speak of even Shakespeare's limitations. So that doesn't matter. Eliot carries the form of drama to a new level in 1935. That yes, drama can be subjective, because without poetry there can be no proper drama, because the inner life is totally kept in the blackout in prose dramas of Galsworthy, Grenville Barker, Shaw, Ibsen. The inner life is completely kept in the blackout. Whereas in such plays, in the plays of Tagore, in the plays of Maeterlinck, in the plays of Eliot, the advancement in Eliot is that he was trying to create also, to maintain also the element of tension in their poetry. Whereas in Gandhari Rabedon, there is nothing of drama. Gandhari is speaking at length, unendingly. And I don't criticize Tagore, because Tagore was not repeating Shakespeare. He was trying to attempt a new kind of form. Maeterlinck was trying to create a new form of art or drama. And in Shadowy Waters, Yeats was trying to create a new form of drama. But Eliot was the first to show that yes, poetry can be there on the stage. Poetry can be concealed poetry. Poetry can initiate action of the play, despite the fact that Murder in the Cathedral is ritualistic play because of the long choric passages. But even then, the chorus has a great role to play, because there is an atmosphere to be created in Murder in the Cathedral. And you will notice that the poetry of the chorus has an incantatory note. In Sanskrit, we call it mantrik. Incantation in Sanskrit is mantrik. There is a mantrik element in the choric passages of the Canterbury Women in Murder in the Cathedral, and that creates an atmosphere, the religious atmosphere. Well, Eliot could have gone a bit deeper in exploring the inner psyche of Thomas Becket, the saint as tragic hero, but whatever he has done is quite enough to show us that, well, poetry can be brought back to stage. Man is not one man, but many men within one man, because there are the subliminal layers. Eliot indicates, at least, suggests some subliminal planes of Becket throughout his speeches. And there is also that interpenetration of speech and action. That is what drama requires. The interpenetration of speech and action. So you will see there is a short exchanges of speeches between Reginald and Thomas Becket. When Reginald comes to kill him, there's a brief exchanges of words. That means the interpenetration of action and poetry, action and drama, emotion and action. So that way it's a great contribution to drama, and for those practicing playwrights of today, Murder in the Cathedral is a great play. And it is called a religious play, naturally, because it speaks much of the religious aspect of spiritualism. But when we speak of religion, don't speak of religion as in a derogatory sense always, because religion is the first step towards spirituality. It's the ladder. You take the ladder and go up to a high pedestal, then remove the ladder. So I don't know whether Hanuman is very fond of Batasha, but if you start giving Hanuman Batasha, then you know the aspect of surrender, aspect of love. And in Murder in the Cathedral, there is a secret metaphor of love in Becket's speeches. Secret metaphor of love in Beckett's speeches, and the love is for the divine. So in many ways, it is a very subtle. Eliot's tactics or Eliot's attitude is, he sees religious aspects or sometimes spiritual aspects in terms of the intellect. Now, there is too much of the intellect interfering in his religious themes, in his spiritual themes. That affects. But many people appreciate that. This interference of the intellect, but still it is a higher rationality, a higher intellect that Eliot uses in his poetry and drama. And not that Eliot is often an inferior poet, as Duchess has said, a great minor poet. No, he has great moments, even in Westland. The best passage in Westland is where the three priests are moving forward, and there is somebody who is coming behind them, hooded, mantled. Who is the third who always walks beside me? It relates Eliot to those questions in Hyperion Ode. Who are they coming? So it's an awe. It's as much an awe as the giant's question, who are you, in Selfish Giant? So the whole play is about purification, the inner war without escape, and this purification of the leader is needed for the purification of the world, for the betterment of the world, because no change can be so radical as the revolution attempted in the change of consciousness. No change can be so radical as the revolution attempted in the change of consciousness. And Eliot was trying to do that in 1935 through the play, and the play has some limitations. The play cannot be confessional. It cannot be Kamala Das's poetry addressing straight to the audience. So, and even in Eliot's poetry, we'll see dots here and there. And as my previous speaker was trying to explain, that the dots are part of the restraint of the poet. You won't speak much. You will indicate. And also there is a demand from the audience that you know what I want to mean by these dots. So this is, let me summarize the whole thing. First, I spoke of the theory of new drama, the return of the poetic drama on stage, because I've said Rabindranath, Yeats, Maeterlinck, and Stephen Phillips were writing on the stage, but Eliot was trying to do something more intellectual, more specific about the return of poetry in a new age, in a new way, keeping the contemporary speech intact. Because I can't speak like Macbeth on a modern stage. And also he takes us back to the Middle Age. Still, the speeches in Murder in the Cathedral are quite close to the contemporary speech, and poetry at the same time, concealed poetry, as I have said. And I've spoken of two kinds of lyrical prose. One is poetry proper, and one is lyrical prose. Then about the chorus, I have already said that there are plenty of choric elements in the play, and they are more passive than active. Many people suggest that they could have been more active in the Greek manner, but Eliot was aiming at something different. You must know what the author is trying to do. The true art of criticism is not to demand from a writer what he can't give us, but what he can give us. The true spirit of criticism is to ask from a critic, from a writer, from an artist, what he or she can give us, not what he or she can't give us. So Eliot offers us plenty of new things in his religious play of martyrdom, plenty of subtler things, both as experiments which may be retained even in recent dramas and theaters. So that's all. I will go for the questions now.